Again, if you're going by how many people died, if you're going by how many people have suffered, I can tell you there are millions of people in this country every single day that are suffering. Some people are dying.
You feel like he's worse than taking away the rights of black kids, black moms, black dads, all across the country, everywhere, codifying slavery into the law.
They don't allow, again, you keep bringing up that.
Slavery, yeah.
Maybe, and I'll give you this, and I'll concede this. Maybe if I was a radio host back in the days when Buchanan was president, maybe I would agree with you.
So I finally had my first debate, and it just happened to be against the filibuster king himself, Brian Shapiro. If I'm being completely honest, watching this back was kind of a humbling experience. My nerves were up and I chopped up my opening a bit, and it was kind of hard for my ego to watch. But hey, the first step was taken. And if you can make it through those first couple minutes, I reeled it in pretty quickly. I'm looking to learn and improve because obviously I'm not an expert. So drop your advice and criticisms in the comments. I'm open to all of it. I wanted to respond to Brian's closing statements live on the show, but I did not get the chance to do that. So we're going to do it right here at the end. Brian played his typical game, subjective emotional appeals, hypocritical double standards, and gish galloping like his life depended on it. And if it hasn't been proven before in every single one of his debates, I think I proved it beyond a reasonable doubt here in this debate that Mr. Brian Shap is suffering from a terminal case of TDS. And by the end of this debate, he essentially admits it without actually admitting it. Let's get into it.
Next prompt is why I believe Donald Trump is the worst president in history.
Josh, I will kick it over to you.
Yep, okay. So, to make it easier for Sarah, I'm gonna try to give you some metrics for what I think or how I determine who the worst president is. I kind of look at it through the lens of human well-being and suffering, and to determine that, I'd look at death, the destruction of the nation, and maybe stripping of liberties. Would you agree with that?
I think stripping of liberties, I can't even talk. Stripping of liberties is a horrible thing. Horrible. Absolutely.
Correct. Now, some of these guys already brought up Buchanan. I'm going to do it again. They brought up how he sat by while the 7 states seceded, basically making the Civil War unavoidable. But not just that. Before he was inaugurated, he was president-elect, and he colluded secretly with a Supreme Court Judge, Robert Greer. What he wanted was a broad ruling in the Dred Scott case, which was, I believe it was a African-American slave who went to the North and tried to have his slavery. He had tried to have his freedom. Well, in that case, Buchanan colluded with Greer so that he could get a broad ruling from the North and South. And then he went up in front of the American people and he lied to them. What he said was, well...
Get closer to the mic, by the way. People are saying they... Yeah.
What he did was so he was trying to codify slavery into the American system. He wanted a broad ruling from the North and South so that when they came out and said that president didn't have any authority to stop slavery from spreading throughout all the territories. Mm-hmm. So he got that ruling by colluding with the Supreme Court justice, right? And that basically nullified the Missouri Compromise, allowing slavery to go all the way west. Not just that, but the Lee-Compton state constitution of Kentucky was to make Kentucky a slave state. Mm-hmm. The people did not want that, but he went against that and went for the Lee-Compton state constitution. I think that, or the decision of the Dred Scott, what that did was make it where no African-American was able to have citizenship, free or enslaved. I think that makes him the worst president.
Okay. So a couple things. Let's just start by the word colluding. I'm not refuting anything you said about Buchanan, and I haven't throughout this entire debate. But if you want to talk about collusion, how about Donald Trump colluding with terrorists? How about, hold on, let me just finish. Donald Trump colluding with the Taliban. You know, we hear a lot about the Afghan withdrawal, which obviously was a disaster. One loss is lost too many. But Donald Trump colluded with the Taliban and helped release 5,000 Taliban terrorists. What about a $400 million gift that he got from Qatar? He got from absolute terrorists and bad human beings. By the way, he didn't just get a $400 million jet and accept it as a gift, but now he can't even fly in it because of safety concerns. Guess who has to fit the bill for that? The American taxpayer. Or a $5.5 billion resort. that he colluded with, as you use, I'm using that same word, with terrorists, or $2.1 billion under Donald Trump's first administration that Jared Kushner received from the Saudis. And he didn't send Mike Pompeo out there towards the end of Mike Pompeo's presidency. He sent Jared Kushner, who's not even a part of Donald Trump's administration, yet he's involved in all these negotiations. It's all throughout our history, like Buchanan and others and John. We can talk about collusion. He's involved in all the. He sent Jared Kushner, who's not even a part of Donald Trump's administration, yet he's involved in all these negotiations. It's the levels of corruption are through the roof. So if you want to talk about like collusion, I'm happy to talk to you about that and all the horrible terrorists and people that listen, throughout our history, like Buchanan and others and John, we can talk about collusion. Absolutely. All really bad. But the levels of collusion and the horrific human beings that Donald Trump has worked with and made business deals with and shady business deals that have cost the American taxpayer a lot of money, I think is repulsive. And if you want to talk about, sat by, I think is the word that you used when you talked about Buchanan, right? He just sat by, and I would agree with you. He did. I give you that. How about all the people that when Donald Trump just sat by, when we were losing 3,000 to 5,000 people a day from COVID, he just sat by. And then today in Iran, when innocent men, women, and children are dying, not just American soldiers.
Did Trump have the ability to save those people in COVID?
Let me finish, and then I'll gladly answer that question. But Donald Trump, actually, I'll answer it now. Donald Trump had the ability as the leader of the free world to take necessary steps to make sure that he wasn't holding campaign rallies with 50 to 100,000 people during COVID when we were told to socially distance.
Weren't there like Antifa protests and stuff while they were telling churches they could not assemble?
Weren't there Antifa protests? Okay, let me be very clear. When we were losing 5,000 people a day, which I think was at the peak of COVID, I didn't want anybody protesting. I didn't want anybody, whether you're anti. Okay, but I'm trying to be fair and honest with you. I didn't want anybody. But Donald Trump is the guy, if you want to talk about sat by, we can also talk about January 6th when he quote, I know Republicans don't like talking about this, but if you
I'm going to grant everything that you say for the sake of this argument.
Okay, but hold on, let me just finish.
Is that worse?
Let me just finish.
Okay,
let me just finish and then I'll answer that. Donald Trump sat by, I'm using your own words, for 3.5 to 4 hours when he was being begged by members of his administration, including Meadows and others, to put out a video to stop the violence. The reason why he sat by, to use your terminology, is because he was enjoying it, because it benefited him.
Access to his internal state of mind.
Here's what I have access to. I have access to the commission, the January 6th commission.
Do they have access to his mind?
They have access to witnesses who testified. So I'm going to give you some of that now. People in Donald Trump's administration, including the First Lady's own communication director, who testified under oath in this hearing, that they meaning multiple members in Trump's administration, not only begged Melania Trump, who also said—
You trust the Trump administration in this case, right? This is one of those times I wanted to highlight the goalpost shifts, double standards, and subjective reasoning that Brian uses. He makes unjustified claims, and he's going to say he tends to trust people who are under oath with the threat of incarceration. Yet, does he extend that grace to Trump? He does not. There's no consistency in whatever standard he uses. Besides, every single person accused of a crime who goes on stand is under oath. So that literally means nothing. I don't think he really has a framework of discernment. For example, when I see or read something that completely fits my own narrative, that's when I need to do the most research and look at it as objectively as possible, with awareness of my own presuppositions and how they shape the facts that I'm looking at. The phrase, "it's too good to be true," still hangs around for a reason. And in a low trust society, which we are in, personal diligence is gold, man. That's right.
I tend to trust people who are under oath with the chance of going to jail if they perjure themselves, are not in the Trump administration anymore, so they don't have anything to lose, and they're not scared of Donald Trump. It is so hold on. I'll answer your question also by saying this. When these people are under oath, but they're still working for the Trump administration, they can't even answer who won the 2020 election. Kash Patel was asked not that long ago, did you tell Pam Bondi that Donald Trump is in the Epstein files? He was asked 11 times, and he wouldn't answer the question. So there's a difference. If you're on your way out the door, whether you're a Thune or whether you're Marjorie Taylor Greene, and you know you have nothing to lose and you're not going to lose any power by being honest, I tend to trust those people a lot more than people that are in the administration or people that are in elected office.
Great. Awesome. So
Does that not make sense?
Do you think that all of that, let's say every single thing that you think Trump did, and he did it exactly because why you think, that is worse than literally splitting the country in half, having it fight each other, 1.5 million people dying?
I think
not just that, but taking away the rights of every African-American slave or person in America. Can you imagine the suffering that caused those people?
Oh, I'm sure it was atrocious.
But
terrible.
not as bad as Trump, though.
So here's what I would say to that.
I need you to concede this.
So here's what I would say to that.
This guy right here was hilarious. And if you don't know who it is, that's Carson. Great guy, assertive, and he seems to have a good head on his shoulders. Go follow him, and I'll include a link in the description.
I think it rises to a horrific level.
He's
and I think
one of the worst presidents, right?
I would say that if you want to talk about minorities suffering, and if you want to talk about 1.5 million deaths, which is all terrible, again, I could list you policies and behaviors that I think could rise to that level.
I don't even know what could happen.
Okay, well, I've just listed those for you, and I've tried to go through with you one by one.
None of it is even reaching.
Well, again, if you're going by how many people died, if you're going by how many people have suffered, I can tell you there are millions of people in this country every single day that are suffering. Some people are dying. Some people that are suffering.
Is that only
directly
true in the Trump administration?
No, in every administration, there are people that suffer based on specific policy. But if we're talking about 1.5 million people, my argument or my retort to what you were saying is, while that is atrocious and horrible, I could also point to the fact that there are absolutely millions of people in this country, including minorities, that are suffering, and some people that have died, let alone taking away their health care coverage, taking away their government benefits, taking away maternity leave. There are a lot of policies put forth by Donald Trump and Republicans in the last decade or so where you can point to millions of people also suffering. Now, if you want to make the argument that this is not worse than this, you have the right to make that argument, and I understand where you're coming from.
But Trump is the worst president of all time.
Correct. I truly feel that way.
You feel like he's worse than taking away the rights of black kids, black moms, black dads, all across the country, everywhere, codifying slavery into the law.
So it would be much more difficult in the times that we are living in today to implement any law like that. That's not my question. So hold on.
This doesn't even matter. He plays this game where he says things like, if I was alive back then, and maybe I'd agree with you. Or it would be hard to implement slavery in modern times. No shit. But this is exactly the type of subjective reasoning that doesn't work in a formal debate when you make the specific claim that Trump is the worst president of all time. And you already agreed to my metrics of human well-being and suffering in the beginning, which makes my claim that Buchanan is worse, well, irrefutable in my view. I genuinely thought I would get him to concede this. But no dice, which I believe exposes a psychological inability to see objective reality, or at the very least, a conscious presuppositional dedication to his anti-Trump bit. And this isn't unique to Brian. I believe all lefties have a reality-denying aspect to their worldview. And I'm not trying to look through this in a presentist lens either. You can even take slavery out of the equation and use the colluding with the Supreme Court justice, allowing the Lee-Compton Constitution to pass against the will of its own people, and sitting by while the 7 southern states succeeded, locking in the Civil War as the variables, and Trump still hasn't done anything to surpass that incompetence or pure malice of Buchanan. Objectively.
So if you want to talk about taking away rights from people, Trump administration is doing that. Millions of people.
Don't even bring up abortion, bro.
I'm not bringing up abortion. Why? I wasn't bringing that up. I was going to bring up immigration. If you want to talk about people that are losing their
American citizens' rights.
What does it say in our Constitution about immigration? What is
that they're allowed due process.
Okay, Trump's not doing that.
What's that due process?
Trump's not doing that.
The due process is once you are found here legally, you are picked up and taken to you are incarcerated.
Even if you're filling out the proper paperwork and you're seeking asylum, say from Mexico. Is that what our law says?
I don't know.
No, of course you don't know.
Well, tell me the specifics.
Okay, I am. So if you're seeking asylum from a country, there's a few countries, a country like Mexico. In our Constitution, in our laws, it says if you're seeking asylum,
even if you're not Mexican,
let me finish. If you're filling out the proper paperwork, okay, and you're coming into this country, our government, and you're appearing in hearings, by the way, the Trump administration, ICE agents are literally deporting some of these people outside of the courtroom. It is illegal. And if you want to talk about due process, look at the people that were sent to an El Salvador prison. This is happening every day in this country. 60 Minutes did a story about this, and they had the names of all these people. Over 70% of those people that were sent to this El Salvador prison, where you wouldn't treat rapists like that, were nonviolent criminals, and their only crime was committing a misdemeanor and not having the proper paperwork. That is taking away your rights, sir.
Is it taking away my rights to allow millions of immigrants to come in here?
That is a different question. Will you address what I just said?
All right, repeat the question.
Do you think it's giving somebody due process when you send people their only crime? Some of the people lived in this country for decades.
Yes.
No, sending somebody to an El Salvador prison where, first of all, they are not from. Second of all, they are being beaten, and they are nonviolent criminals, and they never had due process.
I don't think anyone should be beaten. I don't think
that's what happened in this El Salvador prison.
But is that us?
What do you mean? Is that us?
We do that? Listen,
Donald Trump did that.
We deported people to El Salvador, right? Is that what happened?
No, they didn't deport people. They deported people and sent them to an El Salvador prison where you wouldn't treat rapists that way. You can look this up if you don't believe me.
They deport them to El Salvador, and then the Salvadorians put them in prison.
It was the Trump's policy, and he was asked about
put them in
this.
Salvadorian prison.
It was their policy at the time to send these people specifically into this jail. Now, some of those people, a few of those people had to come back because there were judges that made rulings that this was unconstitutional. Let me ask you a question.
Well,
why is it that in the Trump administration, they have granted asylum to hundreds of people from South Africa that are 100% white, but they haven't granted anybody asylum to one person that's brown?
They're literally being persecuted, and it's actually systemic.
So there are no brown people that have been persecuted that are systemic.
Not
it's only
what
white
I said.
people.
You asked me specifically why they were getting asylum.
No, that's not that wasn't my question.
I want to actually point out here.
And real quick, shout out to Sarah, the Raging Tomato, for bringing the debate back into frame here. I kind of let it get away.
Out here that the entire concept of why we went into immigration is because you were providing a comparison of literal slavery, black mothers, sons, fathers, children of all sorts. And we turned that over into immigration with people who you're saying, admitting have due process. There's still courts that are bringing them back in, and they're still also not slaves, right? So I think there's a metric in here that we could use, but we're not using the metric where we need to use it. We're looking into the weeds on this. So 2 more minutes to really spitfire your biggest points here, and then we're going to move into closing statements.
Okay. Well, I would say my biggest point is that I think codifying slavery into law and sitting by doing nothing in the case of a country being divided and being pointed towards war, which caused 1.5 million deaths, I think that is worse than anything. Even if I granted everything Brian's saying, I think it's worse than all of that. Worse, objectively, worse than all of that, of all time, even.
So is that, you want me to take over from, okay.
Yeah, that's.
So I would say, as I've said before, and I'll say again, I'm not pinpointing one specific thing that
I can do that here.
But what I am doing is I'm collectively taking Donald Trump's actions, his policies, the things he said, the attacks on our democracy, the fact that you're taking away people's First, Third, and Fourth Amendment rights, the attacks on free speech, the attacks on the media. He's called people like us vermin.
What exactly, what free speech was he taking? I feel like he's done a lot for free speech. I feel like he kind of shifted the Overton window.
He's done a lot for free speech. Would you like to talk about the members of the media and the lawsuits that he's had against entities that you want to talk about that?
Do you think
the people that have been fired
to a higher standard?
I think there's something called freedom of press in this country.
I don't even know a lot about this.
We can talk about freedom of press and the fact that they have taken away media credentials in the Pentagon. They don't allow. Again, you keep bringing up that
slavery. Yeah.
You keep bringing up slavery, but I would also say in this era that we are living in right now, he is treating certain people like slaves based on policy.
Did he take away their rights to be U.S. citizens?
Donald Trump is taking away people's rights every single day.
Black people, right now.
Everybody.
He's taking
everybody. Not just black people.
I just want to hear you say that what Trump did was worse than Buchanan trying to codify slavery into law. Who knows how many black slaves died?
I think
because of that.
Okay, so
the Fugitive Act was.
I'll respond to what you just said. I'll respond.
Go ahead.
If you want to talk about any death, in this case, you're talking about black people that have died. And again, it's a collective thing.
I'm talking about the Civil War as well.
I understand what you're talking about. Collectively, we can talk about people dying in this country collectively. And if you, in my opinion, if you add all these things together, whether it is the war in Iran, whether it is taking people's health care away, taking food benefits away, people are dying every day in this country.
I think food stamps needs to be
what's that?
Definitely rolled back a lot.
Yeah. So the point I'm making is that collectively, if you add up all the reasons why people are dying in this country every day, I can make a complete correlation to Donald Trump's policy and why these people are dying every day. Again, healthcare, the war, the fact that people can't put food on the table. So it's not one thing that I say that one thing is just as bad as slavery. I mean, slavery is awful.
I asked you
but
all of it.
Yeah.
I think Trump is worse.
I think collectively, with all the things that I have mentioned.
Respectfully disagree.
Okay, well, I
was honestly surprised here. I gave Brian way too much credit, thinking that he would concede to what seems to me the only choice. I should have pushed for the concession sooner, or made him say, with his own mouth, that he would choose slavery over Trump. But hey, like I said, I'm here to learn. Disagree.
Okay, well, that's okay. We can agree to disagree. That's what this is all about. I think they're both horrible. I can understand why people in your position would say, geez, I think this president was worse than Donald Trump. But let me ask you a question.
What position am I in?
That you don't think Donald Trump is the worst president.
No. The position I meant is that I think slavery is worse than what Trump did.
I understand your point. Do you think Donald Trump is one of the worst presidents of all time?
One of the worst.
Top five. Say top five.
Not really.
You don't?
No.
In our lifetime? Was he worse than Joe Biden?
Who's not woke isn't the worst president.
The worse than Joe Biden?
All right.
Since I didn't answer you there, Brian, the answer is hell no. Trump is not worse than Biden by any means. Here's where we get into the closings, and mine is only about a minute and a half, but I believe I made my point and got the W. Brian goes on for like 4 minutes, so feel free to listen to that or skip, fast forward, your choice.
All right, let's move to closing statements.
Well, I mean, I wanted to get your...
But we're not getting any further than slavery bad, and you say everything would match up to that, and we're not getting...
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So go ahead with your closing thoughts.
Yep.
Well, my closing thought is this, is I think that I was trying to really pull this concession out of Brian, because I think it would be the sane and common sense thing to do. But I think all that I've proven here was that Trump, you do have TDS, and that you cannot take your emotions out of the driver's seat to look at something objectively. I think your presupposition is that everything Trump does is bad.
No,
it is. It is. Because my presup coming in was Trump is not the worst president, and all I had to do was a quick Google search to objectively figure that out. You could too, but you didn't. You choose. You have this presupposition to find things that make Trump bad, and then you see through that lens, and that's why you're not able to concede that abusing your power, violating the separation of powers, and going and colluding with a Supreme Court justice to codify slavery, one of the most heinous acts ever committed in our American history, I think we could agree on that, into law, is not worse than anything President Trump did. And then even add on top of that, the Civil War part. That's 2 points that I can point to and say objectively, in my view, human suffering and human well-being as the metrics, these are way worse than anything Trump has done.
Okay, so again, we're kind of going around in circles here. I can understand the position why some people would take that, Trump maybe not the worst president of all time. But it keeps going back to, you're just deranged. You can't pick apart anything that Trump did that's good, which again is 100% false, because anybody who listens to my show every day would know there are some things that I've given Trump some credit for. Operation Warp Speed, of course, being one of them. There are things that I thought he did that were good. I think the no tax on tips things would have been much better if it was done a little bit differently. I think I like the idea of it, but I think it would have, if it was done a little bit differently. So no, I can point out, and as I've said a million times, I've wanted Donald Trump to succeed. I wanted him to succeed day one when he defeated Hillary Clinton. I said, I saw Donald Trump when he went into the White House with Obama, and I said, wow, that was a really respectful and toned down Donald Trump. This might work out, and I was truly rooting for him. So it's not a derangement thing. It's clearly pointing out things that he's doing that I don't like. from basically every perspective. We could talk about rule of law. We could talk about how this administration is breaking the law every day. We can talk about ICE. We can talk about the economy. We can talk about this illegal war in Iran. I don't know what the hell this guy's doing good. Here's a guy who pardons people who beat cops. He calls them hostages and patriots. He rewards bad behavior and basically says, you can be a terrorist. You can commit these heinous acts and these horrible crimes, but as long as you support me, it's fine. I mean, again, you talked about collusion. He's colluded with terrorists. He's accepted $400 million gifts from terrorists. He's enriched himself, $1.3 billion, which I keep talking about. The corruption, the crimes, the government contracts with his own kids, the people in his administration who have been enriched. I mean, you can talk a lot about how maybe you didn't like Joe Biden or, I don't know, maybe Bernie Sanders or whoever. But the level of corruption and how he's enriched himself, and going back to my original point, which is the people that have benefited the most from this war, Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin, the people in America that have benefited from the Trump administration, they're not poor people. They're not people in the middle class. They're the richest people in America. The Elon Musk, this is why Elon Musk got involved to begin with, because he knew it would help his investors and his bottom line. The richest people in America have benefited off of Donald Trump. Middle class and people that are suffering have been damaged by Donald Trump. It is one of my biggest criticisms of his administration behind his behavior and the Epstein stuff and the cover up there. I just think it's despicable. Besides being a horrible person, I could just go to his policy and we can go back in times in history and talk about slavery and talk about Buchanan and talk about Johnson and other presidents that were atrocious people that were horrible. I think Donald Trump is right up there. And I'm a little bit more focused on Donald Trump these days because this is what I do for a living and he's the president and I cover him every day. Maybe, and I'll give you this and I'll concede this. Maybe if I was a radio host back in the days when Buchanan was president, maybe I would agree with you. Maybe if I was a talk show host and covered the news every day when Johnson was president, maybe I would agree with you guys. So it's also, I wasn't there every day. You can read about it and you can talk about it. And yeah, the things you guys have brought up, which I am aware of, are atrocities. It's horrible. But I'm living in 2026, and it's not because I have something called Trump derangement syndrome. It's because it's my job to cover this guy every day, inside and out. I don't know everything inside and out about Buchanan. I don't know everything about Johnson. They're terrible people, of course. I concede the things that you have mentioned. So that's why I'm focused on Donald Trump, and I'm focused on this administration, as I would with any Democrat if I disagree with them as well. And in just closing, I would say very critical of Democrats when they do things that I think are wrong or bad. I was the first person to just call Eric Swalwell an absolute piece of shit. I think Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are horrible people. I believe they're anti-Semitic and they're un-American. Now, I don't think they should be deported. But I guess just to give a little context, I'm not somebody who doesn't criticize the left. I do it all the time. It just so happens that Donald Trump is the leader of the free world and Republicans are running the House and the Senate. Go ahead.
No. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Shake hands. Let's get you two.
Thank you, sir.
Here.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. And I just.
So there you have it. He concedes, but only with conditions. He makes sure to move the goalpost right at the end to save face. So say what you will about Brian, and believe me, I'd probably agree with you. But the man knows how to talk and he knows how to twist reality to fit his narrative. And that is literally the definition of sophistry. He holds multiple hypocritical standards in his worldview, applying them inconsistently based on his own subjective reasoning. Basically, whatever Brian likes is good, and whoever doesn't agree with him is bad. We even heard him claim to know Trump's exact internal intentions. That requires completely disregarding anything and everything that Trump actually says and replacing it with Brian's own personal interpretation. In logic, that's a textbook fallacy. It literally requires mind reading. So to wrap this all up, we have to understand these worldviews and the deep level of commitment, whether conscious or unconscious, that these lefties have to denying reality or twisting it to fit their narrative. More importantly, we need to be watchful that we don't end up doing the exact same thing to ourselves. Staying dedicated to the truth is what keeps you grounded, sharp, and unchained. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, share the video, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I appreciate all the feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.